Good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here today and share a couple of perspectives on a new market reality, as well as bringing a pattern of the new rising trends. But I think the most important to focus on opportunities. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of challenge to start our presentation today with. As expected, consumer confidence index down globally, lowers versus 8 years ago, as well as for Saudi and for UAE, situation is not different. Consumers starting to be more concerned about job perspective, health, and economy. But I'm more worried about the recovery rather than the current drop, because it will take some time. As you could see, it took around 8 years to recover after 2008 financial crisis, which had a bit different structure rather than the current one, rather than the current pandemic, where some people locked around the world. Airline industry, touristic and HoReCa sectors were hit the most, as well as the small groceries type of stores. Talking about the number of grocery stores, it has been already in a decline, even before the COVID-19. Based on our latest census data conducted in Saudi Arabia, we see that up to 20% groceries in Jeddah, Riyadh, and Dammam have closed down versus 2006. Therefore, highly likely that this trend would continue. As a result of this business contraction, unfortunately, we see an increase of the unemployment, and it will take years to recover and will far exceed the effects of the 2008 financial crisis as we think. Also, I would highlight here an impact on youth around the globe, considering that a lot of students have been employed as the part-timers in restaurants, cafes, and so on. Possibility have no cash to pay for their degree now, or no longer able to try or consume the brands. But let me try to bring a little bit of optimism. While much broader and wider sweeping in nature, the news cycle about the novel coronavirus in the first quarter of this year sparked the global purchase shift, as we could see, that were tied to what was being reported in the news. Sales of the hand sanitizers and certain of food, cleaning products skyrocketed in a step with the news conferences and reports related to the spreading the virus. I think everybody remember toilet paper saga also, which have been in our country, but also around the globe. By now, we see that consumers purchasing just no longer mirrors media reports about the increasing rates of the virus transmission. Even in the countries that have experienced the fresh or overgrowing outbreaks of the virus, such as US, Germany, Brazil, Russia, FMCG purchases remains relatively steady. And in some countries, we also could see, based on the current environment, the current trend with the sales is sort of show quite, let's say, new norm type of tractions. And I think we can link it to the local business reopening changes in restricted living conditions. Also here, I put some of the examples of the UAE and also some categories which show the steady growth, grocery, home care, dairy, but also some categories which is in decline, like for example, beverages, but again, there is an impact of HoReCa type of channels. Massive, and I think sudden shifts in unemployment rates are among the many factors driving the declining spending power of many consumers worldwide. Meanwhile, economic and safety concerns have impacted the routine behavior on consumers, and the impact across different groups is not equal. We split all of the consumers on two different types. One of them, constrained spenders, or those whose incomes have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. And definitely those will spend to survive. Comparing with insulated spenders who may adjust case by case, even though their incomes remain unchanged by the pandemic. As of May 2020, 32% of consumers globally have been impacted by the COVID to some degree, be that an impact to their health or they have just suffered from the job loss, which will definitely impact the way how they shop, what they buy, and definitely where they shop. 68 of the global consumers, and then sort of Africa and Middle East, it's a little bit less, 57%, not been personally impacted by the COVID-19. While their normal behavior maybe have been impacted due to the restriction and closure, their livelihood remains, and pandemic-related health hasn't been affected their ability to buy. If summarize how the individual circumstances can alter how consumers reset their shopping basket, as well as home routines, as well as the justification of the purchase and wallet adjustment. While survival instincts may influence and the wants and needs of constrained consumers, insulated spenders react sort of differently as the pandemic behavior is reset. Moving towards to the sort of more like a different type of the behavioral changes. Overall, what we anticipate with regard to what consumers will buy. Overall, the situation that many consumers will carefully evaluate the product that make up their usual shopping basket, particularly as more and more consumers become unable to maintain their peak COVID-19 spending levels. The consideration set for what is essential will shrink, but it does not mean, and I would like to repeat here, but it does not mean that they will not search, buy products which would have a specific functional benefits. For example, organic or health type of the health and well-being type of the specifics. And here I would like to share a little bit of an example with you from our market. And I think better to say it's a paradox. From one side, we see that majority of the shoppers in UAE have a perception that food price has been increased. And definitely they would like to proceed with some of the actions like cut spends on the luxury and buy only essentials, also focusing on the discounts more, switch to maybe even to cheaper brands. However, and again, this is the offtake numbers, sales numbers. However, we see that the premium price segment on both international players and local players show double-digit growth. And later on, we will give a little bit of more examples on this one. But firstly, let's try to understand what kind of attributes, importance reassessed, or why those things growing. And if you look at the details, health, safety, and quality assurances have become important accelerator in the brand and product decision making, and will remain significant choice driver in the future. Consumers will place increased focus on health products and eating with an expectations that hygiene and safety are foundation blocks for the products and retail offering. For the companies, this means that there is a critical window of opportunity to translate pandemic-minded consumption into continued essential routine. As emerging essential like face masks become mainstays that weren't historically a part of the budget, and new preferences emerge among retail channels. Consumers, especially constrained consumers, will seek justification for every purchase moving forward. And again, I did bring a little bit of examples from you, how the different companies trying to tackle those current trends. On the left side, you see this application, get the fresh type of groceries from the farm, and it can be offer range of premium meats, cheese, ice cream, fruits, and vegetables, which you can get directly from the farm at your doorstep. Another example of the brand where it was the more sort of focusing on the boosting your immune system, where we're talking about pomegranate juice, which is again show the reflection on the current situation. And something which I would like to make as the summary here, those type of the examples, they are not from the value for money, right? They also sort of position as the close to the premium. Moving towards to the home body reset, and actually where the consumption happening. And over the course of the month spent at home, hoping to reduce the level of the virus transmission, consumers have embraced a sort of a do-yourself type of the mentality. I love the name of this one, like a homing, right? But even as many shelter-at-home restrictions have lifted around the globe, some aspects of the self-care and self-services is still around. And let's look a little bit of on a consumer's budget, sort of for essential at home. And what we see that even like those lockdowns and restricted living, sort of going out, we have seen that the shift among many consumers to prioritize money being spent on the home consumption across all regions, spending on the food and beverages at home. And those type of the level, as you could see, once again, across the board, has been either maintained or even increased comparing to the end of the 2019. This is important to note, particularly during the current time where household expenditure are being minimized in many other ways. Again, another sort of example of do-it-yourself or homing, where literally has become quite an umbrella term due to unprecedented and continued demand for a variety of the self-service consumer needs. Bake it yourself, pet grooming, costume hair coloring, and food preparation, those type of trends varied across many countries. And here you could see a couple of highlights and bullets from the consumer in our country, where definitely it's something which they are willing to continue to experience, and all of those indicators which you could see on the slide, they also showing us a grow pattern comparing to the time before. And definitely, especially if you talk about meal kit service, this is not just only about like safety and health measures and so on, where you're trying to avoid the crowd and so on to go to the restaurants and so forth. It's also about the experience which you can get together with your family, together with your kids, when you can order certain of the different parts and recipe, and after you can definitely have a fun and cook at home together with your loved one. I'm bringing again a couple of examples how different brands trying to tackle this strategy. About the recipes I already did bring for you to see, but also with regard to the non-food and sort of the beverage type of products, it's about the wheat. And this is where brand trying to tackle those situations where salons were closed, but sort of women still had a demand for that. That's why it was sort of creation, those virtual type of the salon. And again, there are much more examples from one country to another one where we're trying to use sort of technology and definitely help the consumer during this difficult time. But moreover, once again, I would like to insist on this one, that a lot of those trends, they're not going to be over. They will continue, right? And they will develop in the sort of longer term run. If you're talking about why consumers will make a purchase, we anticipate that consumers will reimagine the role of the certain goods and service play in their routines. We expect there will be room to grow the purchase of the small luxuries within the CPG, particularly as bigger rewards and entertainment budget are slashed within the homes. Consumers will still want to find enjoyment in a life. And we expect the significance of the FMCG purchase could really transform in line with the purchases power shifts over the next year or even more. Of course, with the today's economic climate and rising unemployment rates, consumers may have less discretionary income to work with. As a result, what we can see, 78% of the consumers sort of survived around the globe indicated that they're cutting back to save. With a third or more survived consumers spending less on takeaway meals, travels, entertainment, and clothing. We sort of predict consumers will turn to consumer goods as a mean to indulge in themselves, but in a little bit different way. For example, here again, this is a case from US, and we see that there are certain of different type of the industry. And for instance, if you take the theater, family of constrained consumers, where have certain of high pressure on their spends, the purchase of the refrigerated meal combos could replace what used to be higher price food they had bought at some of the big event in some of the restaurants around 6 months ago. Again, there are much more examples, as you could see, depends on like what kind of industry and country you are, but definitely those trends, even in a different countries, we see that they're accelerating. And if you come with a bit of maybe examples from the UAE, you can see here about walk cinema. You also see here about certain of gastro home type of the fine dining restaurants where you can get this experience to your home, right? Maybe again, you feel uncomfortable in some of the extent due to the safety, like to go to the cinema, whatever, but you still can bring it to your home. Or maybe you're limited with the budget, but you still wanted to get some of the touch from this certain of previous time which you had before. And again, indulge yourself. This is, I think, for companies seeking to benefit from the shifting use cases and occasions for the purchasing the FMCG. I think it's imperative to anticipate how the response of the constrained and insulated spenders will differ. For the constrained consumers, it could be something as simple as the box of cookies that now represents a significant greater portion of one tightened budget. In this scenario, does it significantly more of reward than even would have been before? Very limited budgetary flexibility will drive constrained consumers to focus on essential needs. Therefore, in some of the extent, impulse buying may be a lever to grow here, especially where the companies can help consumers justify the reward alongside the new rationale behind what types of small luxury they can afford to indulge in. For insulated consumers, there is more discretionary spending that could be directed to FMCG. It can be like a dining certain of experience that foregone due to the COVID concern. Thus, the purchase of the premium cut meal, as we could see on example on a slide, on the right side of the slide, can, in a certain extent, equate to a safer, customizable, or modern day of luxury. Last, I think, also the most interesting point or question: how much consumers will spend? And again, I think it is certain of good news, which I wanted to start from. We see that the early indication that promotional baseline has been reset. And literally, we have observed a historical low level of trade promotional activity across various of the countries. In fact, promoted sales reached a 4-year low across the US, Spain, Italy, France, Germany, and Poland in the second quarter of 2020. Also, in UAE, it's a 3 percentage point below than a year ago. and now it's around 30%. This makes sense, right? Given the demand of the products among the pantry stocking consumers and the relatively low need to promote most goods in order to sell them. But times changing rapidly. And what we see that UAE shoppers starting to be more promo sensitive in some of the extent, and more of them switching even the stores or searching for the promo offers versus the time before. And again, I think this is a different strategy, and definitely we can talk later about this one during the panel discussion. But this is a couple of examples how the different players trying to tackle this question. And as you could see, some players trying to change the price perception in the stores like Tesco, launch Aldi price match campaign, and Aldi is the retailer which has positioned themselves as the low day price. At the same time, we see another example of the KitKat, where certain of KitKat trying to associate themselves with the experience which consumer have during this time, and give a chance when you order in the KitKat, given the chance to win a Netflix gift card. Again, there are different strategies, different mechanics, and later on we can focus maybe a little bit more on that one. In a nutshell, no matter whether your consumers are constrained or insulated, brands and retail facing unprecedented change, impacting where they shop, what they buy, why they buy, and how much they are willing to spend. Definitely, this will compel a fundamental business recalibration in order to orient towards the future recovery and reinvention. And I do believe that if we are trying to wait that things will come back, if we are trying to wait for the rain to be over, I think we will lose the big opportunity, because it's not just a rainfall, it is a climate change. Thank you very much.